Hello, everyone. Let's see if Osama, I can see Osama's online. Everyone is obviously on mute. We don't have too many people joined in as yet, as I would have suspected, given some of the current anxieties. Um, I suspect over the next few minutes, maybe we're going to have a few people sign in. Osama, how are you?
Good, Doctor. Alhamdulillah. And you?
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. It's been a bit of, obviously some trying times, a bit of anxieties, but
Yes, of
inshallah.
course. Everywhere. Inshallah, it will resolve very soon. And
And I know that particularly this evening can be a little bit nerve-wracking, given some of the rattling of the sabers, as they say.
no,
Uh,
inshallah, nothing will happen and it will end today, inshallah.
I hope so. Really, I hope so,
I am
inshallah.
optimistic, inshallah, it will resolve very soon.
I think we all need to be, and then obviously, we just want the best for everyone and for our communities and for all of the people, wherever they may be. Um, Osama, I will take your lead as per the last time. It took about 15 minutes after the hour for the majority of the folks who were going to sign in to sign in. Can I just have, are there any of the attendees that are actual parents that were looking forward to this event, or are we still all of the physiotherapists, sorry, speech therapists?
It's mixed, but I think not only from our organization as of now, we have more from outside,
Okay,
and there is
wonderful.
more joining now. I am
Yep.
helping also to let the people in.
Yeah. So if someone takes that responsibility from
I
me,
am handling that.
yeah, wonderful. Okay. And for the sake of time and for the sake of everyone's time, not the least of which for today, I'm usually very, very, very generous with my time. At least I try to be. But everyone, I'm going to try to keep today as close as possible to the
Yes.
hour that we intended. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I want to be respectful of everyone getting home, wherever they may be. Um, and as I was mentioning to Osama, obviously, these are a little bit of a, anxiety provoking period that we're in. So may God keep us all safe. But I'm going to have a hard cutoff at 4:15, i.e., so I'm going to give a few more minutes for more folks to come on, and then I
Yes.
will I will ensure that we have a 1 hour. So in other words, 4:15, I'm going to have to move on. So we'll have for today. And again, this is meant to be a series. Thanks to Osama and to the Intercare team. This is meant to be a series that continues with different subjects, different talking points. Today, I want to address something very unique, and it is at a cornerstone in most of the things we're going to talk about, whether it's ourselves as adults or whether it's in our children. And it's a very interesting, it's a very fun aspect of genetics, and it is the genetics of behavior. And believe it or not, genetics plays a very, very large role in behavior. And it plays a cornerstone in setting our compass. How do we pursue our health goals? Well, one of the things we have to understand our inclinations and our behavior. So, this is going to be the subject for today. To repeat, the genetics of behavior is what we're going to be addressing today. And of course, if at the end of that we have any questions, either related to today's conversation, the one that we had before, I'd be happy to take them from you. Okay, so again, leaving just a few more minutes to let more folks come into the chat, to the presentation, and we will begin. So I'm looking at a beginning at probably 3:10, no later than 3:15. So everyone grab a cup of coffee, grab a cup of tea, some snacks, healthy snacks, I hope, and we will be looking at a start at 3:10, no later than 3:15. Okay, I'm going to take my video off, just I'll put it on blank for just a few moments as I prepare my slides. I will be actually pulling up actual slides to be presenting today. In the last session, it was more talking. Today, there's an actual slide deck that I prepared to share with you all. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, everyone. We are getting closer to the 3:15 time stamp start point. I see that there are folks that continue to come in. So, uh, Osama, may I ask that you or someone of your team continue to be the person that
Yes, yes.
accepts?
I'm
Wonderful. Okay, wonderful. And what we're going to do now is uh, I'm going to enter the slides so that I can start the presentation and we'll begin. Okay, so bear with me and I want to just make sure if someone can keep me honest, let me know if you're seeing my slides. Okay, alrighty. Can anyone, either Osama shout out or anyone, are you
Yes,
seeing my
indeed.
screen and slides?
Yes, doctor. Clear.
Okay, wonderful. So as I mentioned, the topic of today's conversation, as per the listing, it's about resetting or setting your compass, i.e., your health compass, through the lenses of genetics. Today's conversation is going to be more unlike my first presentation, which was really just speaking, setting the tone, setting concepts. Today, I actually want to give you a presentation that consolidates a lot of the things we spoke of in the first sitting, keeping in mind that this is going to be a series, keeping in mind that to the extent that you're all interested, we're going to keep this series going as a give back to the community to help educate our communities, our parents, regardless of whether their children are, on the spectrum, not on this, just giving knowledge to our communities that create a better opportunity for health. God willing, that is the responsibility we have, and we want to give to the community these insights. These series of lectures are going to be lectures that I've given across the world over many years at several of the leading conferences, health conferences. And this particular one is one that I give as an introduction to the concept of genomics as it impacts your health, your general health, not just when there's an actual illness, but learning about genetics so as to help you understand how it actually impacts your health. We call this lifestyle genomics. And the concept is that you can learn to live in harmony with your genes, which of course is the recipe for optimal health. So with this in mind, the first thing I always start these presentations is a note of humility. And that is, as much as we're going to be talking about, really interesting details and concepts today, it's really important for us to understand that we must maintain humility. We know far little about the human body compared to what we don't know about the human body. So, in other words, there's a lot more we still don't know versus what we know. Now, that may seem disheartening, especially if you're speaking to a healthcare provider, but it's important. It's important that as healthcare providers, we realize that we don't know everything. Far, far, far from it. So, what does this mean? It should leave us open minded. It should leave us with an ability and a humility to say, we don't know everything and we're opening to learn more. So, while starting on that point, that very, very important point, I want to go back to, to the very beginning. I want you to recognize through the lenses of that humility something about yourself. That you, me, and everyone else, your children, your parents, we are the product of a single sperm and a single egg. We are the product of a single sperm and a single egg. And in that sperm and in that egg, it is remarkable that we could actually see through special processes the operating manual of the human body. And so, what we're looking at here, everyone, is we're looking at the chromosomes, i.e., chromosome 1, chromosome 2, chromosome 3. For those of you who are parents, for those of you who are parents that may be a little bit older, for when they would still do what we call karyotypes, what you're looking at is a karyotype. That is where, when you were pregnant, for example, we took some amniotic fluid from you and we prepared the chromosomes of your baby, i.e., to see is the operating manual of that baby appearing to be healthy. And what we'd be looking at is each chromosome, there are two copies of it. These are the actual chromosomes, believe it or not, from an actual baby growing inside of a mother. And each chromosome, it's given a number 1 through 22. Okay, and from chromosomes 1 through 22, male or female, we should have two copies of each chromosome. Notice that as the chromosome number, as we get from 1, as we get higher and higher, the chromosomes become shorter and shorter, smaller and smaller, until we get to chromosome 22. And then the 23rd pair, that is why the company that used to exist, it's out of business now. It used to be called 23andMe. What was the reflection of that name? 23andMe refers to the fact that there were 23 pairs of chromosomes, 1 through 22, and the 23rd pair is what determines the sex of the baby. If it is an XY, at least the genetic sex of the baby, then you have a boy. And if it's two X's, you have a girl. So that's where the name 23andMe, meaning my 23 pairs of chromosomes, the knowledge within it, that's the name of that company, 23andMe. Now, these chromosomes, of which you have two copies, one from mom, one from dad, every one of these chromosomes have your DNA. Your DNA is what's wrapped up and condensed into these chromosomes. And in total, there are 3 billion sequences of these A's, G's, C's, and T's that make up your DNA sequence, 3 billion of them times 2. 3 billion in one set of chromosomes that you got from mom, 3 billion in the other set of chromosomes you got from dad, i.e., from mom's egg and from dad's sperm. As a quick side note, certainly in older generations, we would quote unquote lay the blame, God forbid. What a horrible thing. We would say, oh, the sex of the baby is due to the mother, as though the father didn't have any role in it. Well, it turns out the sex of the baby is determined not by the father, but not by the mother, but by the father. It is the father that will give either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome. The mother only has two X chromosomes. This is the makeup. This, what you're looking at here, is a male baby, one X, one Y. If this was a female baby, we would have had everything that you see here, but there would be two X's, not this little crunched up thing, which is the Y. In other words, men, our Y chromosome just has the genes that determine how to use the TV control. We're not very important, the Y chromosome that make men. The women have the real chromosome. And so women are two X's. Men, we are an X and a Y, obviously being light-hearted. As I mentioned, each one of these chromosomes together, the 23 pairs, there are about 3 billion sequences of A's, C's, T's, and G's. And because we've got two copies of it, we've got 2 times 3 billion what are called gene base pairs or nucleotides. Okay. Now, I want to put this into perspective a little bit for us. So this DNA molecule that is made up of these A's, C's, T's, and G's is the same molecule that defines life as far as we know it in every living entity. So, in other words, DNA is the cornerstone of the operating manual of plants, of bacteria, of viruses. There's a small exception when it comes to viruses, but it's not relevant. And certainly of mammals, from apes to humans to cats to mice to dogs, you name it, to fish, and so on and so forth. We all have its DNA that encodes the operating manual of the human body. Now, when we go back to these chromosomes, each chromosome contains the DNA, and it is the DNA that makes up the DNA sequence, is the paragraph that creates the instruction, and that's a gene. So, chromosomes contain DNA. DNA is that molecule of life made up of these building blocks A's, C's, T's, and G's. That's just the abbreviation of the molecule. And those A's, C's, T's, and G's in combinatorial sequences, that's the alphabet of the human genomic library that makes up our genes, Our genes are the instructions that tell our body how to do what it does. Okay, so importantly, in chromosome 1, the largest of the chromosomes, unsurprisingly, chromosome 1 contains 240 million ACs, Ts, and Gs, and that corresponds to about 3,000 genes. There are about 20,000 genes, 20,000 instructions that make up the human operating manual. So there are 20,000 instructions at any given moment in time that is telling our cells how to do the job, how to make energy, how to digest food, how to get rid of infections, how to get rid of toxins, and so on and so forth. 20,000 instructions, and 1/7, approximately, 1/7 of those instructions are on chromosome 1, i.e., about 3,000 genes, compared to chromosome 1. There are about 400 genes. Well, doesn't surprise us because, of course, this is one of the smallest chromosomes. There's a little factoid that may interest you. Of course, this is only fun for the geneticists in the room. You will notice that the chromosomes are ordered in size. One is the biggest, then two, then three, then four. Well, it turns out that chromosome 22 is actually an anomaly. It is actually bigger than chromosome 21. Chromosome 21 is actually the smallest chromosome other than the Y chromosome, which again, men, we don't count for much. Okay. But before we had really good resolution, we thought the chromosome 21 was bigger than chromosome 22, and it basically stayed in scientific literature even after we discovered 22, as can be seen here, is actually bigger than 21. Again, just a little bit of fun science factoid. Now, chromosome 18 has 600 genes. Chromosome 19 has 1,700 genes. Now, why did I put this? Just to show you. As much as the chromosomes are decreasing in size, it doesn't mean that the smaller the chromosome, the less the number of genes. Here is chromosome 18, which is bigger than chromosome 19, yet chromosome 18 only has 600 genes, and the smaller chromosome 19 has 1,700 genes, i.e., almost 3 times the amount of genes. I point this out to show you that there's still miracles. It's not like an ordered encyclopedia. There are very unique things in the way that our chromosomes are made up. And this is one of the reasons why, for those of you parents, you may find that you've heard things where there's a child that has an abnormality on the chromosome 18. But you will never find that there's a child that has an abnormality in chromosome 19. In other words, because chromosome 19 has so many more genes than chromosome 18, it is one of the smallest chromosomes, yet it has more than half the number of genes than the largest chromosome. Any abnormality of 19 affects so many genes that it's not compatible with life. Okay, so just to put this into perspective, this is the science of genetics, that we understand not just the genes, but we understand how the genes, the instructions, how are they packaged. Okay, the X chromosome that's the chromosome that helps us know whether you're male or female. Females have two X chromosomes. It has 1,400 genes. And, well, the Y chromosome, guys, we don't have much to boast about, only has 200 genes. Amongst them, as I mentioned, the gene to be annoying, the gene to change the TV screen remote, and everything else that is associated with being male, obviously being light-hearted. Now, also, obviously, tongue-in-cheek, size does not matter. The smallest gene known is a histone. It makes one of the histone proteins. This is the protein that we produce as an allergic reaction to something. Histones. It's a gene that only, quote unquote, has 500 A's, C's, T's, and G's. So, in other words, this gene, you could actually write out the entire sequence of this gene, 500 unique combinations of A's, C's, and T's, and G's. You can write that out on a piece of paper, one sheet of paper, 500 A's, combinations of A's, C's, G's, and T's. And that would be what? That would be the code, that would be the gene, just 500 A's, C's, T's, and G's that makes a protein that can be it's very important in our body's function, and it could literally, just a 500 sequence gene can cripple us at times. If any of you have had a really bad allergic reaction that can be everywhere from annoying, itchy, watery eyes to flushed skin to hives to something more dangerous and life-threatening like an anaphylactic shock. Okay, this is just to be clear. I'm speaking not of the, let me correct myself. I was speaking of the histamine gene, just to be clear, which is also a small gene. So I want to correct myself. Everything I've just been saying is the histamine gene. Here, the histone gene, which makes the histone protein, not to be confused with the histamine, which is what I was referring to. The histone, which is only 500 base pairs, my correction, is a protein, and the reason I swapped both things was to highlight how important just a 500 sequence protein, this is the protein that helps become the binding of your DNA. This is the protein that wraps your DNA into the chromosomes. So something is radically important, because I showed you chromosome 19 has way more genes than chromosome 18. Chromosome X, way more gene than chromosome Y. What helps determine how we wrap and package genes into chromosomes? The histone protein. Now, equally, the histamine protein is not that large compared to the largest genes that we know of, one of which is called the dystrophin gene, which makes a protein. And the dystrophin gene, unlike 500 A's, C's, G's, and T's, that one gene is 2.2 million A's, C's, T's, and G's. You need 2.2 million sequence in order to make the dystrophin protein, which is one of our muscle proteins. We need about 2.3 million A's, C's, G's, and T's to make the Casper protein, which is involved in neuronal function. Wow. Okay. And so these are the largest genes. But hold on. I'm only sharing this with you to create the marvel within you, just how miraculous this is. Now, genes make proteins, right? So a gene, which is the A's, C's, G's, and T's, get converted. That is the encoding of the protein. So we use genes to make proteins, and proteins are the things that you see. Proteins are the enzymes in our body, the building blocks in our body, the transporters in our cells. Proteins, and obviously the fats, make up our cells and who we are. And genes make proteins. But in an ironic twist, the largest protein, or one of the largest protein, known as the Titan, after the name Titan, which is one of the largest protein, isn't made by the largest gene. In fact, the largest protein is only about 1/10 the size of the largest gene. Let's take that for a moment. And again, looking at the miraculous nature. And so I certainly don't want to get too much into philosophy, but anyone who understands the miracle of genetics really has a hard time explaining evolution. In other words, I'm not going to get philosophical on you, but genetics helps us to appreciate, for those of you who have a faith, and of course, no harm, I'm not commenting on anything. But once you understand the miracle of genetics, you can't help but recognize that there is something greater than us. because the largest protein is not made by the largest gene. In fact, it's made by a gene that is one-tenth the size of the largest gene. And I don't want to get into how that is possible, but I'm sharing these things with you to show you that it's not this linear, easy, empirical building blocks that modern science has led us to believe. If you understand the details, it's far more beautifully complicated, beautifully miraculous than you might think. That's all these slides were meant to help you understand. Well, let's continue in this miracle. Your internal universe is unlike any galaxy you've ever seen before. There are, in the human body, 37 trillion cells in the human body. Keep in mind, the average person from the time they're born, if they lived up to about 80 years of life, cannot count to a billion if they counted every second of their life. You can't count to a billion. This is 37 trillion cells, of which about 50 billion of the cells of our body are fat cells, of which 2 billion of the cells of our body make up our heart muscle, and of which 86 billion of our cells are the neurons in our brain. However, of the 86 billion cells, neurons in our brain, those 86 billion cells make approximately 100 trillion connections in the brain. To put that into perspective, we do not believe through scientific computation that there are 100 trillion stars in the galaxy of the universe. We have more neuronal connections in the human brain than we think there are stars in the universe. Again, I'm only sharing these beautiful, I hope you find this, obviously, for me, this is one of the most exciting things, hence I'm a geneticist and a biologist, but I'm sharing this with you to show you the miracle of the human body. To do what? To bring us back to the first slide that I started, which is humility. Okay, and by the way, all of these 37 trillion cells do not include the uncountable number of bacteria and microbes that coexist in our body. And by the way, that's not just in our GI tract when we talk about the gut microbiome, that's obviously a majority, but there's a microbiome that coexists in our skin. There's a microbiome that coexists in the eyelashes. If you ever looked at human eyelashes under a microscope, it will freak you out. If you have a phobia about little creepy crawlies, you would not like to know what's living in your eyelashes, or in your scalp, or on your skin. And God forbid, you wouldn't want to know what's living in your mouth. You probably wouldn't approach your partner quite as nicely if you knew what was in our mouths. But this is part of the miracle of the human body. And something that you should know, the person that you look in the mirror, and this is not a metaphysical, this is real. We are constantly fading in and out of existence. The cells that you see on this ugly Dr. Mansoor face, that, mashallah, God forbid, I have a face, at least thankfully, one nose, two eyes, one mouth, so I'm good. But maybe it's not the most pleasant face to look at. But this face that you're looking at, that you're actually observing, that is talking to you, the cells that made up the face that you're looking at were not the same cells that my recording of this same lecture from 7 years ago, that face that my audience looked at 7 years ago or 10 years ago, which is about how long I've been teaching this course, from 10 years ago, if you saw a video of me teaching this course, the face that you would have been looking at was not the same, not just because, well, I'm 10 years older. No, literally, The cells that made up that face 10 years ago no longer exist. That person physically no longer exists today. That's not a metaphysical statement. It's a statement so that you understand your cells are going through constant division, dying off, being replaced constantly. Now, some cells do this faster than other cells. Skin cells, unsurprisingly, are replaced much faster than cardiac cells or brain cells, for example. But all of your cells are constantly dying and being replaced every single day. Okay, so I shared this analogy with you in the first sitting, and it is to take home that we are an orchestral masterpiece. We are not the product of 22,000 genes beating to their own rhythm, 22,000 instructions doing their own thing, but we are a living proof, a living manifestation of 22,000 genes expressed, being played, beating to a perfectly synchronized rhythm. Your body, when it is healthy and when we treat it appropriately, hence when we come to the term of resetting the compass, when we treat our bodies healthily, live a healthy life, eat healthily, sleep healthily, exercise and work and love healthily, interact with each other healthily so that there's no stress and there's no wars and there's no constant worry and the phone's going off at 3 a.m. in the morning. When those things are not there, and when we are healthy, your 22,000 genes, as I spoke of in the first presentation I gave you, your 22,000 genes are being turned off and turned on at the right rhythm, the right volume, at the right time, so that we are a perfect synchrony when we are healthy. Humility. If you understood everything that I just said to you, I can come back to where I started. We have to have a degree of humility in approaching the human body, in teaching about the human body, and in trying to cure and heal and make better the human body, because we certainly don't know all of the secrets of the human body. Far, far, far from it. And anyone who tries to tell you otherwise. And I'm not going to call out any of the TikTokers that are out there presenting themselves like gurus, but one of the most gross and just, if you just even understand kindergarten level biology. There's a TikToker out there, I'm not going to name any names, and he came to fame saying that he was a biologist, saying, I have computed the exact date every human being, we can predict the date a human being will die based on their biomarkers and genetics. Anyone who tells you that, first and foremost, they don't have a clue about human existence, first and foremost. Which one of us knows whether we're going to survive crossing the street tomorrow? God forbid, may God keep us all healthy and safe. Much less making such an abhorrent statement that by studying human biology and genetics, we can tell you how old you're going to be. Horrible. That is in and of itself, first and foremost, there's no humility in that, hence why I'm starting my talk this way. And secondly, it clearly indicates that the person in question actually has no clue what they're talking about. Okay? And I only speak out about this with a degree of passion because, again, we're gathered here, we're trying to learn, we're trying to educate ourselves, but at the same time, there's so much in social media. One of the biggest questions as a clinician, let me gather my thoughts. Of one of the largest parts of my time when I interact with patients, it's to do what? To correct misinformation that parents and individuals, as patients, and just people interested in their health to correct misinformation that they're hearing about on social media and so on and so forth by people who are creating a jingoistic view of human health without understanding the true depth and miracle of the human body. And were we to do so, we would have greater humility and we would not be making these jingoistic catchphrase statements about the human body. Okay, so this brings us to the concept of lifestyle genomics. And what lifestyle, this field of wellness, that using genomics to improve health. I coined the term. I actually was the person many, many years ago. I wrote the first paper and I titled it Lifestyle Genomics. And what was my subtitle? Ancient wisdom combined with modern science. You see, the idea is, do we aspire to simply live longer? Do we want to be 200 years old and can't move and can't feed ourselves? Or do we want to live longer while maintaining vitality and health? And I think that most of us, God willing, I presume, will want the latter. We want to live longer lives to be with our loved ones, but for only so long as we are vitalic and healthy, and we are pushing the envelope. We have different statements now, right? Today's 60 was yesteryear's 40, and so on and so forth. But I really want you to, and I'm not at all diminishing the advancements in modern science, but I really want you to show me a 120-year-old that you would want to be right now, sitting at 40, sitting at 50, 60, sitting at 60. They're beautiful people who've lived long lives and they are full of the world's wisdom, but you can still see by the time you get to 120, the body is aged and it's aged remarkably. Okay? So a lot of what we are, particularly in this world of Dubai and the glass flashy, everyone is longevity, and we want to talk about we're going to live longer. Great, hopefully for good purposes. But we must also recognize, again, from a humility perspective, that the body is going to age. And what we want is we want to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. And it's not just a number, oh, we lived to 110, 120, or whatever number you may think of in your mind. Now, something else has been important, and that is pan-ethnic. In other words, when we look across ethnicities, South Asian, South Chinese, Filipino, Africans, Russians, Northern Europeans, and everyone else, indigenous populations from different parts of the world, we've learned something. And what we've learned is there's a truism, there's a common denominator amongst the people from all different ethnicities, all different cultures, all different geographies. Those who are most likely to maintain health and vitality throughout their lives adopt lifestyle and nutrition practices that are cognizant, that are relevant to their own unique genomic makeup and environment. Now, 300, 400, 500, 1,000 years ago, they weren't thinking of the word genomics, but when you looked at ethnic, unique, beautiful populations, we clearly saw how they ate, how they lived from the lands that they were in, were unique to those lands, unique to their cultures. And in our modern world, the reason I'm putting this down, and by the this is the study of lifestyle genomics, you see, we used to know, for those of you who are mums, who remember your grandparents, your grandmothers, depending on where you're from, you would have remembered, or your grandmother would have remembered, a time when, if a young woman was pregnant, she was and she was instructed, she was advised what food she should eat, what food she shouldn't eat, and after childbirth what foods were beneficial for her body to recover. In other words, there were these ancient wisdoms, and those ancient wisdoms were unique to different peoples in different places, i.e., the advice and the things that we would do were suited to the unique ethnicities, the unique genomic makeups, because after all, yes, I'm a human being. Yes, I share the genetic makeup of all of you, but if there's an Asian Chinese on this presentation, we clearly are going to have genetic differences versus a Northern European person, versus a Western European person, versus an African person, someone from the African continent, of which there's huge variations in that beautiful continent, versus someone from the Indian subcontinent, of which it's not just Indians, southern Indians, vastly different at times than northern Indians, and so on and so forth. So we really have to appreciate that despite the melting pot, and the reason I'm bringing this is to set this foundation for all of the series of talks we're going to do, because one of the we have many blessings living in our modern world, access to everything we want, access to all foods of all varieties, access to information. Some guru saying this is the greatest, latest, another guru saying this is the latest, greatest, fasting, not fasting, intermittent fasting, not intermittent fasting. We've all of these things, but what we don't realize is we cannot treat these recommendations in a blanket manner across everyone, because within you, any one of you, is a legacy of a genomic makeup that is unique to your heritage and what is appropriate for you to be healthiest based on your genomic legacy. Did it tell? We can all agree upon basic things that are healthy for us. We can all agree that smoking is not healthy, all things equal. We can all agree that eating foods that are not processed is healthy. We can all agree that eating foods that are not laden with pesticides and herbicides is healthier. But in the minutiae, should I have more fat containing foods? Should I focus on more vegetables, more fruits? Should I? Those finer details, we have to appreciate that inside of your genetic legacy are variations that are going to determine for you, based on your beautiful lineage, what is better for you versus better for George versus better for Khadija versus better for Umar or for Kiran or for whomever might be. Okay, so the study of lifestyle genomics and functional genomics, as the years went by, the term lifestyle genomics that I coined many years ago was replaced, the same concept, functional genomics, understanding how genomics allows us to understand the human body and act accordingly. Now, in this amazing study from Fraser University, they studied about 500 super seniors. What are super seniors? Super seniors are people who are older than 85 years old, and at 85 and older, they've never had any real illness to talk. They've had a cold and they've broken a limb in an accident or something, but they've never had any real chronic disease, no heart disease, no cancer, no mental decline. They're as healthy as they ever were, and they're 85 and older. So these are called super seniors. You can imagine they're rarer than diamonds, especially in our modern world. To be 85 and you're not on any medication, you have no real illnesses to talk about, an incredible blessing. And so in this amazing study, one of my colleagues in university is Simon Fraser in BC. They looked at these 500 super seniors and they wanted to ask how much of their being a super senior was due to their genetic makeup and how much was due to, you know, none something other than genetics, i.e., lifestyle, eating habits, social habits, lifestyle habits. And what they found was, now this study is up for a little bit of debate. I want to be honest with you. So the number might not be exact, but the trend is appropriate. What they found was about 20, based on their computations and their statistics, they found that 25% of being a super senior was due to genetics, and 75%, the majority, was not genetic. It was lifestyle, diet, environment, social interactions. So that's good. In other words, it makes us feel, well, We're not fatalistic about our genetics because, after all, according to this study, about 25% of your well being and longevity would be due to genetics, 75%, a majority, would be due to other than genetics. Now, speaking as the geneticist in the room, and this study is now well over 10 years, it's about 17 years or so ago. What we understand now, by understanding the genetic makeup better than we ever have before, this number is probably more like 40-60 or 35-65. In other words, more of what we know is based on genetics, but it's still not the majority. So my comment when I was asked to review this paper, I said, that's good. I think it's good news that the larger part is lifestyle. So that gives us an intervention point where we can improve our chances of living a long, healthy life. In other words, it's not based on genetics. But my question is, that's good news, but which lifestyle for which genetics? Are we, as the South Asian, am I going to have a lifestyle and a diet as the Maasai people of the beautiful Kenyan region around there of Africa? Will I be the healthiest version of myself if I transplanted myself, got adopted by a Maasai family, and ate and drank and lived like a Maasai? Well, first and foremost, I'm woefully lactose intolerant. So I'm going to have a pretty hard time on a high milk diet, much less a diet of milk mixed with blood. I mean, I really doubt I'm going to be the healthiest version, even though some of those people are the most beautiful, healthy people. But they are abiding by a lifestyle and a diet suitable to their noble genetic lineage. Will I be the healthiest version of myself living in, pick a Chinese village, I don't mean to be stereotyping, where I'm eating much more rice, noodles, a higher carb diet, really, all things equal? I would have died 15 years ago from diabetes based on my genetics. Okay? Yet those people are living the healthiest version of their lives, and they're not suffering from what I'm suffering from, and hopefully, probably, I'm not suffering from what they're suffering from. So, the point of all of this in today's session, when we talk about resetting one's compass, the key cornerstone that I want you to appreciate, if I've been able to share this with you, is you cannot hope to be listening to TikTok and Instagram and every latest, greatest trend and fad you think is the latest, greatest trend and fad for yourselves. It may have value in it, but you have to ask the question, is that thing, that diet, that supplement, that lifestyle thing, that whatever thing, is it optimally suited to my genetic legacy? That's the $1 million question, right? When you have some dude saying the healthiest thing is to just live on fruits, the fruitopia, I don't know, whatever diet they call it, fruits, because it's the thing and you're going to be the healthiest and you don't have bad animal fats, bad quote unquote. Okay, well, maybe there's a guy out there, gal out there eating fruits and they're the healthiest version of themselves. I doubt it longitudinally, but okay, I'm not a naysayer. But I know, based on my genetics, and I dare say many South Asian and Arab descendants, all that fructose, you will die from it if you were only on a fruit diet. Your body will be riddled with inflammation if you were only on fruit-based fructose. Healthy fruits, mind you. Okay? Again, you have to understand what's right for your genetic makeup, and this is the concept of lifestyle or functional genetics. Okay. So all of this to say is that beauty is in diversity, the ability to live healthy, beautiful, long lifestyles. And each of the images that you're going to see here of these absolutely beautiful traditional cultures, okay, they all are known to be able to live gone and live healthy, long lives, but healthy, long lives based on absolutely, completely different choices of eating habits and even lifestyle habits and geographical environments. They're completely different, yet they're all known for beauty, health, and longevity. So this brings up the concept of what we call living longer or aging well, squaring the curve. It's a concept that has been used in longevity medicine for a long time. And on the y-axis, what we're going to have is we're going to have a health quality of life, meaning the more we go up on the y-axis, the healthier we are. And on the x-axis, this is our lifespan from birth to death. Now, in healthy traditional societies, meaning traditional societies prior to modern world, modern medicine, what did you see? You saw that there were people who, of course, were born somewhat feeble, might I add, and in many traditional societies, the first few years of life are precarious. Without modern medicine, without modern infrastructure and water and so on and so forth. But those people, once they got over the hump of the early sort of vulnerable years, they quickly, in their early teens, they were essentially adults working, and they stayed healthy, all things equal, until some events, and then they quickly declined. So they lived healthy lives for most of their lives, and then whether it be due to the wilderness they're in, due to the environment that they're in, and then something would happen and then they would die. This is what is called the curve of ancient societies or healthy traditional societies. Then came along this curve. This curve is the curve of modern humans, where we decreased child mortality. In other words, more children survived. Good. Whether, medications, let's call it vaccines, we don't want to open that, well up. But the point being, more children survived, no two ways about it. And fine, we would thrive, but much sooner compared to ancient societies, the wheels start wobbling. We start showing signs of chronic disease, of obesity, of insulin resistance, cancers. We're living longer, but from much sooner, we're aging and we are not as healthy for a larger portion of life. So most of us living to the age of 80, just picking a number, we knew that we were not the best version of ourselves from when we were 40. So, in other words, for about half of our lives, we felt like we were declining. For the ancient societies, they were the best version of themselves right up until pretty much the end, and then they declined. So this is the difference between what we call the aging curve of traditional societies versus modern societies. And yes, in modern societies, we live longer, but we're not living healthier. So what do we actually want? What is the goal of functional genomics or proper, true anti-aging longevity medicine? The goal is to get the best of both worlds. The goal is that we quickly reach our optimal strength and well-being. We're not 16-year-olds living on the couches playing video games, but that we are strong, fit individuals, and we stay healthier for much longer. We do not decline in our 40s, and then pick a number, and whatever that number is going to be versus what people are saying in, the TikTok world, we are going to have to leave this world at some point in time. But what we want is we want to be living as healthy as possible, and then we return to what we return to. Okay, so this is the objective of longevity medicine. And the reason it's called squaring the curve is what we want to know is what is the difference between this curve and the current curve that most of us are living on? And the difference between these two curves, which is the area under the curve, it's a mathematical principle, is the things that will differentiate whether you're going to have this life or this life. And at the top of what differentiates these two things is, are you going to have chronic diseases? Diabetes, cancers, heart disease, chronic diseases. What is the level of stress that you'll be under? What is your oxidative stress? How balanced are your hormones? Are environmental pollutants throwing off our hormonal balance? What is the level of toxification that we're living in? The quality of our environment. One of the things we hope and we pray that saner minds will rule this part of the world, that we don't want to be dealing with the fallout of all of these pollutants and chemical, killers associated with bombs and associated with all the horrible things we see in our modern world. These things literally in the atmosphere and in our environment are toxicants that damage and age the body. And are you living a one size fits all? Did you realize that what is optimal for you is not what every TikToker says, but it is found in an intelligent understanding of your genetics, an intelligent understanding of your operating manual, not Peter's, not Omar's, not Sophia's, but your operating manual. Okay? Those things are going to differentiate and determine whether we have the longevity curve or the more modern chronic disease curve. So, lifestyle genomics is the study of how an individual's genomic legacy converges with lifestyle, which includes diet and environment, to contribute to health and well being. So the objective of resetting your compass, hence the term for today, and I know that I said I was going to talk about human behavior. It was a bit of a stretch. The title for today was Resetting Your Compass. I usually go on a little bit longer, but because of everything that's going on, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, I wanted to confine myself to 1 hour. And so I will do so, and I will open the floor for questions, keeping you a little on edge in a positive way, looking out for the mood and behavior that comes from this understanding. But to close for today, the concept of resetting your compass meaning in the trajectory of health, in our trajectory of life and well being, we need to know that we're pointing in the right direction, i.e., that we are living to the best of our ability, eating accordingly, working out accordingly, taking the right supplements if we need it, taking the right things, whether they're hormones or not, if we need it. But all of those ifs are not generic ifs. They are based on your unique genomic legacy. So, resetting the compass, everyone, is based on first knowing what your genetic legacy is. Obviously, says the geneticist in the room, that is based on your genetic makeup, obviously. And then what we want to do is we want to understand how does that individual legacy triangulate with the environment in which you are living, the lifestyle that you choose for yourself, and the nutrition that you fuel the body with. You see, for most of us, and I conclude with this is the picture of health. If you want to think of an image that represents health, this is that image. What does this image mean? It is an image that says your environment, to the extent that you control your environment, whatever you can, purifiers in your home and so on and so forth, avoiding cigarette smoke, avoiding shisha lounges, avoiding. You control your environment, choosing organic cotton and mattresses that are, healthy, that you spend 8 hours a day sleeping on, and whatever you can control in your environment, not using artificial air fresheners. I'm sorry, I'm calling out my laundry list of my gripes that people aren't aware how dangerous they are. Okay, so this this is the picture of health. What does it mean? It means your environment, your nutrition, and your lifestyle are perfectly synchronized into your unique genomic legacy. You see, let me not, we all have, or at least some of us may have, that example of our great uncle or great grandfather. He smoked since he was 12 years old, smoked until he was 95 years old. And you go, well, you see, he smoked and he's 95 and he was as healthy as and he passed away peacefully in his sleep at 95. May we all have a beautiful life and a beautiful passing. But what you don't know is How good was his detox genes? How good was his microbiome? How good was his other things that compensated for his exposure to toxins in that cigarette smoke that you, in your genetics, may not have that protection? Okay, so this is the pictorial image of health. Now, unfortunately, most of us, because we do not know our individual genomic legacy, we don't know anything about our operating manual, most of us are going through life with this image. What does this image illustrate? It illustrates that because we don't know what our genomic legacy is, we are not making environmental decisions, nutrition decisions, lifestyle decisions that are synchronous, that are optimal for our individual genomic legacy. So, what is the pursuit? How do you reset your compass? You reset your compass by first understanding what are the cardinal points, the north, south, east, west of your genomic legacy, so that you can then readjust your lifestyle decisions, your nutrition decisions, your environmental choices to the extent that you can control it, so that they are synchronous with who you are as the individual. And you can take anything. You can take someone who is 85 and going strong. And they said, I never slept more than 6 hours in my life. I never slept more than 6 hours. For someone else, 6 hours every day is dramatically not enough. At least by 2 hours is not enough. And that will not ever lead to an optimal outcome. For one person's okay. Another person says, I run a marathon every month. Yeah, and they don't have an ounce of body fat. But for someone else, and in fact, for many, 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 many other people, subjecting your body to that level of oxidative stress associated with repeat marathons, i.e., repeat cross training, you're fit, you got muscles, there's no fat in your body. Oh, look at, he's the picture of health. Yet internally, that lifestyle choice of that particular type of exercise is so oxidative, it's aging the body as opposed to keeping the body healthy. So, in other words, anything we can think of that could be good for one person in any of these three regards could actually be deleterious for someone else. And so, to conclude, the series, thanks to Rashid and to Osama, that we've launched into the first of my discussions was to give you big high level pictures, especially for the parents in the room, things you should be concerned about for your children. Now we begin an actual series where we go through the things that I teach to help people, presumably the parents, for themselves, for their parents, their siblings, and their children, the cornerstones of concepts that are not jingoistic, not the latest flashy TikTok, Instagram posting, but real, mature understanding of the body. And it is based on this principle of resetting the compass. That's why you will see that my original company after I left the corporate world many years ago and I came back to the clinical world, this is my logo. It's kind of, I don't know, hopefully it's not too cult, weird looking, but what it is, it's not Illuminati, everyone, but it's M for managing, managing your genetics. That's my original company. And it is that, M for Mansoor, by the way, in the synchrony of this triangle. And what that's meant to be is this, that health, if we were to put it into a picture, health and optimal health happens for any one human being. Optimal health is one. When that person knows the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west of their genomic legacy. In other words, they know some of the big, important things about their genomic legacy. They don't have to know 22,000 genes, but there are a few genes. They better know what version of those genes. We better know what versions of these few important genes, what I call the cardinal points in your genome, north, south, east, and west. You need to know what that legacy is. And based on that legacy, we choose an environmental, nutritional, and lifestyle triangulation that is optimized to your unique legacy and not optimize or not optimize. So we want to go from here to there. And I just will close very quickly. For some of you who've been a little bit more in the biohacker longevity world, is this all gobbly-goo? Is it all philosophical? Is it real? What I want to share with you is this is an actual patient of mine. And just so that you know how long I've been doing this, this was a patient of mine in 2013, March 27th, 2013. And I'd already been obviously many years doing this, but this was, 13 years ago I saw this patient. Okay? And when this patient came to me, he was, let's see, 13 years ago, 72, he was 59 years old when he came to me. He was 59, 13 years ago. And when he came to me at 59, he is of Germanic descent. He was the picture of health, not an ounce, and I mean not an ounce of body fat. He was like a cycle. He could be on the cover of a cyclist magazine at the age of 59. He would make most 25-year-old men blush as far as how fit he was. And we performed on him something called a telomere test. Now, a telomere test, without getting into the details, is a test where you can measure something on your chromosomes, the edges of your chromosomes, and it will tell you something called your biologic age. Now, this is not the same as those crazy guys who tell you, I'll know how long you live. This is just a marker. So basically, here's how you read this. The length of your telomere helps you to understand, are you aging at the same rate of your chronologic age? Are you aging slower than your chronologic age? Or are you aging faster than your chronologic age? So at the age of 59, you can see just before 60, his telomere length was almost identical. It was on the curve as his chronologic age. In other words, simply stated, without getting into the nitty-gritty of this test that we did in March of 2013, this ultra healthy person said that he was biologically aging at the same age as he was chronologic. Now, hey, that's realism. You'd go, well, okay, whew, that's good to know. But for him, he was like, are you kidding me? I am the picture of health. I do not eat a single sweet carby food. And he didn't, by the way. He exercised like a fiend, and so on and so forth. He assumed that his biologic aging was going to be younger than his chronologic aging. Now, I want you to pay attention. This was in March 2013. What we did was we worked with this person for 1 year. Here he is, the 1st of April, literally, of 2014, literally 1 year and a couple of days, 1 year and a couple of days later than the first test. And now here's his telomere age. How do you read this? You read this by taking the telomere length. In other words, his telomeres had grown. When your telomeres grow, you are slowing down your aging. In other words, a year later, when he turned 60, as you can see, his telomeres were now like a newborn. Now, this is obviously not everyone gets this type of result, but it is to show you something profound. This is real results. What this shows you is the ability to make changes, which is what we did. We discussed his genetics. We discussed what he thought he was doing that was healthy, what he thought he was eating that was healthy. We discussed what his choices were. We took him from here, which was even still healthy for him, but we took him to here. And when we took him to here, his biologic aging slowed down ridiculously, i.e., healthily. So I will end by saying, can you reset your genetic compass for a healthier, brighter future for yourself and your children? And the answer is yes. And the answer to that is you have to first start by knowing a few important things about your genomic legacy so that you can adjust and approximate and amalgamate your choices to allow it to be in synchrony with your legacy. Thank you, everyone. Going to get into the human behavior. I would have continued had we not been in the days that we're in, but I want everyone to be able to take some time, de-stress. After all, that's one of the contributors to chronic aging. So if you are interested in taking this forward, today the title was Resetting Your Compass. If you're interested, and we do this again, we'll talk about human behavior. How do we respond emotionally, which sets the stage? We think about health as physical things, but we forget how much emotional health, our behavioral tendencies, and yes, it's very genetically determined. That will be our next presentation. Thank you all for those who stayed online. Uh, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer a few of them. Okay. Well, I know that this is a little different from when you think I thought we were going to hear about children, but what I wanted to do is I really wanted you to understand how important that genetic knowledge is. So now anything that you can think of, when you think of, I chose this diet for my child, I chose this diet for me, I chose this hormonal replacement because I'm going into menopause or even in the med, you need to ask yourself, are you making the right decisions based on your genetic legacy? That's the message that I wanted to give you today. I hope that landed in the right place, and I look forward to whenever Rashid and Osama set the next presentation. If we want this to happen as a series, I look forward to it, and I will look forward to seeing you all again. Have yourself a wonderful day. If there are no questions, I'll put that offer back one more time. Any questions? And if there are not, we'll conclude for today. Okay, everyone, be safe out there. Hopefully, tonight isn't quite the deadline as some people are saying it's going to be.
Inshallah.
And inshallah, God willing, hopefully humanity speaks louder, and we hope that we have a safe place to be regathered here for other talks, if you are inclined to it. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.